Hello, you're watching James. My name's James. You're watching me, and I am talking about watches. Well, recently I was on YouTube watching watch related content, which is something that I do probably a little bit too often. But I saw a video from one of the creators that I like posted saying alternative budget watches or affordable watches for grail watches or luxury style watches. And I thought, wow, that's cool. I like the idea of that video. I watched it and I enjoyed it. However, there was a couple of little issues that I had with it personally. Not with the content creators, not with what they were saying, but I found their choices probably a little bit too generic, or at least the watches that they chose to try and find affordable variations, a little bit too stereotypical sort of luxury watches. Watches that are talked about a lot online and probably in my mind anyway, talked about a little bit too much. Not to say they're not great watches, I'm sure they're absolutely amazing watches, and I do happen to like some of them as well. But what I like to do with it in regards to content that I create, what I try to put out there online, are sort of being a little bit more personalized in regards to my opinions about my passions. And I find that that probably then creates a better video. I know when I'm looking at content creators, I really enjoy the content creators that sort of show a little bit more personality and a little bit more passion for their own particular watches that they like, and that attracts me to watch the videos. So trying to find some watches that they like, that I see them passionate about, really makes me feel better and more connected to that particular video. So that's what I'm going to try and do today. A similar themed video, a video about grail watches or luxury watches that are quite expensive, and then some more budget or affordable alternatives. So today I'm going to share with you 5 luxury watches. 5 luxury watches that are particularly good. Well, let me be specific. I'm going to share with you 4 watches that I really love and I would really love to own if I had that sort of money, and 1 watch which I think just should be on this list. A watch that I like but probably don't love as much as the other 4. And rather than just give one alternative, I'm going to give you 2 alternatives to each of these watches. One of those alternatives is going to be definitely an affordable budget alternative. They are all going to be good watches in their own right, but they are certainly at that affordable sort of scale. The other watch I'm going to give you is what I think is probably the best value, the best quality watch that you can get as an alternative to these sort of luxury watches. They aren't going to be affordable watches, but they are going to be what I'm going to say sort of is a sort of entry-level luxury price, or perhaps a affordable grail watches. Watches that you may have to save up for, watches that you may have to sell some in your collection to afford, but at their price points, they are amazing watches and they are achievable. Well, at least achievable for most of us. Let me see what you think. If you think they're achievable, let me know. If you like them, let me know. But let's jump into this list of 5 watches with 2 watches for each of them. You'll sort of see what I'm talking about as I go along. Now, I do want to note that this would be an easy sort of video to make if I started talking about homages. I don't want to talk about homages today. So I'm not going to be mentioning any homages specifically to the watches that I'm mentioning. I'm looking for sort of well-known brands, well-known watches, all automatic watches that are sort of alternatives to these sort of luxury watches. As a result, they're not going to look exactly the same, and I don't want them to look exactly the same. As I mentioned, I don't want to talk about homage watches today. I want to talk about watches that have a sort of a feeling of the luxury watch, that perhaps have some inspirations from those luxury watches, but are a worthwhile alternative to consider it if you are on much more of a financial budget, just like me. But let's have a chat about these watches. So the first watch I want to mention on this list is a well-known watch, and it is a grail watch for a lot of people. And it is a watch that has been on my sort of grail list for a very, very long time. It is the Omega Seamaster. In particular, I like the Planet Ocean, but I'm just going to talk about the Seamasters in general. This is a very popular watch, a very popular range of watch, and it is spoken about a lot. So I know I mentioned I'm talking about my personal ones, but this is actually on my personal grail list. Now, if you want to go and buy just the standard Seamaster from the website in Australia, it is $8,250. And that is not a cheap watch. It's certainly not a cheap watch for me, and it's certainly not a sort of price range that I'm going to buy anytime soon. So I want to think about some alternatives. And if I'm on a budget, what is my budget pick for the Omega Speedmaster? Well, I'm going to be looking at Rotary, a brand which I haven't actually spent a lot of time with, but it's a brand that quite interests me because they seem to put out some really interesting and affordable watches. Specifically, it's the Rotary Seamatic. It's 300 Australian dollars. It comes with a automatic Miyota movement, sapphire crystal, 300 meters of water resistance, 42mm case diameter, and it comes in a range of different colors. I think this is a really good possible alternative to the Seamaster, and it certainly looks like a really good watch in on itself. However, if you want to spend a little bit more money, if you want to invest a little bit more, get something a little bit special in its own right, but has a bit of a Seamaster flavor, well, there's a range of watches that I think are really worthwhile looking at, and that are the Mido Ocean Star watches. Now, there are lots of watches in this range. There's lots of watches with different specifications, different movements, GMT complications, different sizes, and different price points. But the one I'm going to talk about specifically today certainly has a bit of an inspiration from the Seamaster as far as I'm concerned. It is the M042430110410. Okay, not the best name, but this is the watch that I'm going to be talking about today. And you can certainly see that there is some Seamaster vibes going on here. But this watch is absolutely fantastic. They are well respected online. They have amazing movements inside of them. This one has the Powermatic 80, which has the 80-hour power reserve, a very well-known and respected movement. It has a 42.5mm case diameter, and again, for a dive watch, I quite like that sort of size. Sapphire crystal, 200 meters of water resistance, and it's coming in for 1,600 Australian dollars. That is brand new, and I've seen quite a few websites in and around that price range. However, this range of watches, there's quite a few out there, and I've actually seen some on the used market for under 1,000 Australian dollars. Not this specific one, but there are some out there. So this might be one that is worthwhile thinking about if you want a really good quality Swiss made watch with a really good quality movement, but you don't want to spend the sort of $8,000 range, or if you're not in that sort of market range. These Mido watches certainly look lovely. They certainly have that sort of Seamaster sort of vibe to them. I think in their own right, they are an absolutely amazing watch. Now, next on the list is the IWC Pilot watches. For me, I absolutely love Pilot watches, but I've not always absolutely loved Pilot watches. Up until recently, I always considered Pilot watches interesting, but not really my thing. I always considered IWC to be one of those brands which I just assumed was really good quality with great movements, but why would you spend that sort of money on a watch that looked like that? You can get lots of watches that look like that. But I'm starting to now understand more and more as I sort of delve into Pilot watches why these are so good and why they cost so much. In particular, this is the Big Pilot 43, $13,300. I am absolutely not going to be buying a $13,300 watch. But thankfully, there are some amazing alternatives, especially when you're talking about these Type A and Type B Flieger style watches. But how do you find the best ones? Because there are lots of different variations out there. And let me tell you the two that I've picked. From the budget aspects, I am going with the Escapement Time. Yes, the Escapement Time off Aliexpress. I actually looked throughout a huge amount of ranges of watches trying to find the best budget alternative, and I just kept coming back to the Escapement Time. I own this watch. It is absolutely fantastic. It is a 40mm case diameter, sapphire crystal, contains the PT5000 movement. It only costs 230 Australian dollars, 100 meters of water resistance, and it is wonderful. I really, really like this watch. I was specifically trying not to sort of talk about AliExpress watches on this particular video, but when I looked at all the other watches that were in the more budget category, the Escapement Time was just so much better. So really, this is the one that I would recommend if you're going for a budget Flieger watch, because you're not only going to get an amazing watch, but you're going to get the choice between the Type A and the Type B as well. Absolutely worth sort of considering if you're on a budget. Now, what if you're not on a budget, but you're certainly not on the IWC budget? Well, again, there's quite a few different options out there, and I've been spending a lot of time trying to find the perfect sort of Pilot watch that is out there that may cost a little bit of extra money, but is worth that extra money. And I've come down to the fact that Stowa is absolutely the correct brand to buy if you're going to spend some extra money on this style of watch. The one I particularly like is the Stowa Classic 40. I do like the Type B Fliegers, but I also love the Type A Fliegers. This one here you can either get with the logo or without the logo, hand winding or automatic, date or no date. As I mentioned, 40mm case diameter, sapphire crystal, contains the Sellita SW200 movements. If you get the hand winding movement, it's a slightly modified or a different Sellita movement. Absolutely stunning looking, beautiful looking, and on the website in euros, 1,250 euros. But that includes VAT, which is the European taxes. For me, I would actually be able to get that a little bit cheaper, but then I'd have to pay Australian taxes. But I'm just going to put up the price of what it is listed on the website. Now let's talk about probably my favorite grail watch at the moment, the Grand Seiko White Birch. Now, when I'm talking about this one, I'm also going to be talking about the Snowflake because that is quite a popular watch. But if you want to go buy that White Birch or the Snowflake, you're going to be paying $15,000 for the White Birch and about $10,000 for the Snowflake. And that's a lot of money. And I'm certainly not going to be spending that sort of money. What I do hope, and I have seen with the Grand Seiko watches, is that on the used market, they do sort of come down in price. So let's see what happens with that White Birch. I'm keeping an eye out for it. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about budget alternatives, and we're talking about not so budget alternatives, but great alternatives. The budget one, I'm going to be talking about the Seiko Presage cocktail lineup. These watches are absolutely incredible. They really, really are. And I know they don't look exactly the same as the Snowflake or the White Birch, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're trying to find and talk about alternatives that are worthwhile. Now, if you're asking me, or if you're watching this and you're asking me, oh, well, they're not super budget watches. Well, if you keep your eye on them, you can actually find some great bargains. I have found a number of these Presage watches with these beautiful dials for under 400 Australian dollars. In fact, I've bought two Presage watches that were under 300 Australian dollars. It did take a little bit of searching, and it did take a bit of time to find those ones, however. If you are interested in a Presage watch, just take your time, keep your eye on it, keep your finger on the pulse of the prices, wait for a sale, wait for one to pop up, and you will get a bargain. These watches are stunning. They have a 40mm case diameter, hardlex crystal, 50 meters of water resistance, and you're buying this both for that beautiful dial, but you're also buying it because it is a Seiko, and we can appreciate Seiko as a great brand in on itself. Of course it is. It's one of my favorite brands. Now, to spend a little bit more money on a watch that has that sort of look of the Grand Seiko, well, we're sticking to Seiko again. Oh, I'm not sure if this is a little bit boring in this regard to this particular watches that we're talking about, but of course we're going to stick to Seiko because we are going to talk about the Baby Snowflake. The Baby Snowflake being the SARX, the SARX055. This is not as cheap as the Presage watches. This is a little bit more expensive. I've been seeing it for around about 1,300 Australian dollars, and I had the opportunity to have some hands-on experience with this watch a few weeks ago, and it is beautiful. Beautiful dial. Seeing that dial in real life is something a little bit special. It has a 40mm case diameter, the 4R15 movement, so it has a better movement inside of it, 100 meters of water resistance, titanium case with a hardening coating, and sapphire crystal. Yes, if you want sapphire crystal from Seiko, you're going to have to pay for it. Absolutely beautiful watch. Now, next one on the list is a sort of style watch that I have been becoming to really, really appreciate. It's relatively simple. It's nothing too fancy looking, but I just really enjoy the look of a simple, beautiful dress watch, even though I don't have that many opportunities to wear one. And what's the best looking traditional sort of simple dress watch? Well, it's from a brand called Vacheron Constantin, and it's the Traditionale. Now, this is not a cheap watch. When you check out this watch, you think, that's a nice, neat looking watch, but try to find a price for one of these. Now, the one I could find for the cheapest amount of money was on the used market, and they were asking 85,000 Australian dollars. Wow, that's a lot of money for a watch. I have no doubt that it is stunning. I have no doubt that it is well made, but I also have no doubt that I will never, ever spend $85,000 on a watch. Never. However, I love the look of it. So of course I want to look for some alternatives. And there is lots of good alternatives out there on the market for a lovely, crisp, simple looking, beautifully well made, beautifully sort of exhibited dress watch. But let's go with the budget option. For me, it's actually the Seagull. I had a good look around some other options, but I really like the Seagull watches when it comes to dress watches. They are beautiful, they are well made, and they are generally affordable. This one here is one I had recently. It's the 819.12.6066. Beautiful looking watch. really enjoy owning this one, and it's only 220 Australian dollars. It has a decorated movement on the back, albeit nowhere near as good as a Vacheron Constantin, but it looks good. 41mm case diameter, automatic seagull movement, sapphire crystal, 50 meters of water resistance. And if you don't like this one, well, they have a whole range of sort of dress looking watches, and all of them look pretty good. But you say, yes, that's a great looking watch, but I want to spend a little bit more money, get something a little bit better quality. I want a Swiss made watch. What should I go for? Well, Vacheron Constantin. This is a brand that I have been kept getting drawn back towards. There's some interesting watches in their range, but the one that I get drawn back towards is this one here, the Classics Index. Yes, a fairly simple dress looking watch, but it's beautiful. Very simple, very crisp, and it contains a nice FC303 caliber automatic movement. It's a high beat with 38 hours of power reserve, has a sapphire crystal, 50 meters of water resistance, and brand new, about $1,595. These ones, however, I would actually direct you to the used market. I've been looking at these on the second-hand market, and for around about $600 to $700, I've been seeing quite a few of them. So if I was going to pick one of these up, that's where I'd be looking. And I think at that sort of price range, you are going to get an amazing watch. Okay, so how can I possibly talk about this sort of style video without mentioning this particular watch? And for me, I like this watch. I find it interesting. I understand the hype behind it. I certainly appreciate what it has done for dive watches, what it has filtered down into the dive watches over the years, but it's probably not a grail watch from me, or at least it's a grail watch from me that is lower on the list compared to quite a few other ones. Again, not to say I don't like it, it's just not high on my list of sort of grail watches. It is, of course, the Rolex Submariner. Now, prices of Rolex Submariners, well, how do I price a Rolex Submariner at the moment? Well, I don't know. They're all over the place. Let's say $20,000, if you can get one for $20,000. I'm not going to pay $20,000 for a Rolex Submariner. To be honest, I wouldn't pay $10,000 for a Rolex Submariner. Well, I would pay $10,000 and I'd then go sell it for $20,000 or $30,000, but that's not what I'm talking about. For me, it doesn't have the value in regards to a watch that I want to have in my collection. But I do like the look of it. I do like the styling that it has passed down to other watches that inspired other watches. And if I was going to buy a budget alternative, a watch that I think is inspired somewhat towards or by the Submariner, it would be the Orient Seamaster. I think in the budget realm, the affordable realm of mechanical dive watches at the moment, that is one of the best watches you can look at. But realistically, I think you could look at any of the Orient divers, whichever one just suits you best. There is definitely some inspirations from the Submariner in those watches. If, however, the Seamaster is the one that you like, just like me, you're looking around about 300 Australian dollars. Price does range a little bit, but that sort of seems to be the average price if you're looking at the lower end of pricing. It comes with the caliber F6922 automatic movement, 42mm case diameter, 200 meters of water resistance. This is well known to be a great watch. It's known from a very well-known Japanese watch company. It's certainly going to be a good watch in your collection, and I'd be surprised if anybody is ever disappointed by it. But you want to spend a little bit more money, you want to buy something a little bit special, well, that's exactly what I wanted to do, and I didn't even know it at the time. It's this one here. It is the Longines Hydro Conquest. When I bought this watch, it was the most expensive purchase that I'd made on a watch. I was not looking for a watch that was inspired by a Rolex Submariner. I just wanted a nice black dial dive watch that felt good quality, that I liked the look of, and was in a price category that I could afford. When I bought this one, it was 1,300 Australian dollars. Unfortunately, since then, it was a few years ago, the prices are going up and up on these watches. Now on the website, they're about 2,000 Australian dollars. But why do I think it is such a good watch? Why do I keep talking about it? Why have I kept it in my collection? Well, I think for that money, at least $1,300, $2,000 I think is starting to push it a little bit, but I think you get an absolutely outstanding watch. Both the caliber of movement, the L888 automatic movement, which has a 72-hour power reserve, it's beautiful. I can tell you right now, this gains 1 second per week. That is absolutely incredible. Not only does it only gain 1 second a week, but it is a beautiful movement to sort of handle, to wind, and have on the wrist. It is very slim. It is a beautiful size. This one here is the 41mm case diameter. Of course, it has a sapphire crystal, 300 meters of water resistance, and everything about it is just beautiful. It's not perfect. There are a few things that I would have changed if I had the opportunity to do so, but it is stunning. Every time I put this watch on, I just think, how did that cost only 1,300 Australian dollars? Whenever I have this on and I compare it against somebody else's watch, if they happen to have something a little bit expensive on, I keep thinking, this is as good, or at least the experience of wearing it is as good as the more expensive watches. All right, guys, that's my list of 5 luxury watches and some alternatives to them. I hope it was an interesting video. I'd love to hear what sort of watches you've purchased over the years that you've found to be a good alternative to a luxury watch, and feel free to comment on my choices today. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I do hope to see you in the next video.